Is that you cannot bear the idea of two people being in love.
Is that really what you think of me?
Sanditon on Masterpiece.
Sunday night at 8 on MPT.
We at Sage Policy Group recognize that this is a challenging period for households and businesses. But Marylanders are intelligent, strong, inventive, and entrepreneurial. Eventually, this economy will bounce back stronger than ever.
71 acres in downtown Baltimore devoted to learning, discovery, care, and service. We train the professionals who secure the health, well-being, and just treatment of Maryland citizens. We create the knowledge that cures disease and strengthens communities across the state and around the world. UMB makes the world more just, more enlightened, healthier, and more humane. We are UMB.
Claim your future through UMBC's new graduate programs in software engineering. Providing modern approaches to software development and implementation, UMBC's faculty is ready to help connect you to resources and opportunities in this in-demand field. This program is made by MPT to enrich the diverse communities throughout our state and is made possible by the generous support of our members. Thank you.
Maryland drivers getting a break at the gas pump.
We do think that that's a policy that is important to move forward to help people deal with this shock and then see what happens, down the road.
Should parents see school lesson plans?
We are not asking for daily lesson plans to be published. That type of detailed information is available to parents through their Schoology accounts.
And new debate over the state's long-settled abortion rules.
The best thing we can do to reduce abortion happening later in pregnancy is increase access to care.
This legislation seems to be opening it up to a whole bunch of new individuals, and that's very concerning.
For 40 years, connecting Marylanders to their government, this is State Circle.
Good evening. The big story around State Circle this week, writing abortion rights into the Maryland Constitution. Nancy Yamada reports.
Today, the Maryland House of Delegates will vote to enshrine late-term abortion into the Maryland Constitution.
Discussion on the House bill creating a ballot referendum allowing Marylanders to decide whether abortion rights would be protected in the state constitution included heartbreaking personal stories.
I was one of those women that had a baby with a severe birth defect. I was offered in the state of Maryland a late-term abortion.
Graphic details.
The medical procedure to abort a baby after 24 weeks includes injecting drugs into the baby to kill her.
And strong emotions and convictions from both sides of the aisle.
The best thing we can do to reduce abortion happening later in pregnancy is increase access to care. We are removing financial barriers to care.
The Abortion Care Access Act would expand who can perform abortions. Right now, it's limited to licensed physicians. If passed, abortions could be performed by nurse practitioners and physician assistants. The amendments put forth by Republicans were plentiful.
My amendment will prohibit abortion after 24 weeks gestation, unless there is a threat to the life of the mother. We have to recognize that pregnancies come in all varieties, and one-size-fits-all laws do not work in healthcare. That's why we have rejected bills like this many times in the past.
This legislation seems to be opening it up to a whole bunch of new individuals, and that's very concerning. This amendment's very simple. It just states that in this moment, a physician needs to be there so they can answer the tough questions.
Physician-only laws exacerbate health inequalities for people who already face the most barriers to abortion care. People of color, those living in rural areas, those with low incomes.
Every amendment met the same fate.
The amendment fails.
There was, however, consensus when it came to how lawmakers conducted themselves during the emotional floor debate.
Probably the most difficult issue for people like myself to lose on is this one.
But I'm really proud of the minority party and the majority party of how we really stuck to the issues. Everyone shared their beliefs. Everyone who spoke on the floor shared very strong beliefs. But we were able to have an elevated conversation that was on the issue, that was on the policy, on the bills.
Lawmakers are considering another bill which would require private insurance companies to cover abortions. Meantime, House Republicans have put forth about a dozen bills restricting abortions. It's unclear if those bills will get out of committee and reach the floor. I'm Nancy Yamada for State Circle.
Public schools could have to disclose more detailed curriculum information. Sue Copen has that story.
Baltimore County resident Amy Adams says there was a benefit to the pandemic's virtual classes.
We got to see what our kids were learning, what teachers were teaching, and how schools were using their time.
But Adams, with 3 kids in public school, told the Senate Education, Health, and Environmental Affairs Committee this week it also presented learning challenges as well.
After watching my younger 2 struggle, I started by writing to their teachers and then to administrators in the curriculum departments and then to board members asking for more information about specific recent curriculum changes.
Adams told the lawmakers it was tough getting answers.
I've been told that a summary of curriculum is available online. BCPS calls this a year at a glance. I've also been told that detailed curriculum information is unable to be shared because it is protected as intellectual property. Changes to curriculum are discussed in committee meetings that occur during the workday a couple of times each month. Rarely are these changes communicated clearly to parents or brought to the full board meetings that are held in the evenings.
Senator Mary Beth Carrozza says her proposed legislation will change that.
It's a simple bill, and what it requires is that the curriculum be posted on the publicly accessible websites in the schools. So we know right now that some of the school systems are posting some general information, but this bill takes it to the next level to actually have more details posted for parents, for the general public, for taxpayers.
Carrozza's bill would apply to all public schools in the state and would require curriculum information for every course to be posted on a website accessible to the public. County boards of education would be required to ensure compliance. On that site, you would be able to find information about instructional materials, assessment techniques, internet links for textbooks, and course syllabi.
We are not asking for daily lesson plans to be published. That type of detailed information is available to parents through their Schoology accounts. We think it's a reasonable expectation in a world where almost everything is available online for the very qualified and knowledgeable administrators to oversee the online publication and up-to-date curriculum.
Among those opposing the bill, the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. In a letter to the committee, the board said it was in favor of preserving each local board's governance role and authority to develop educational policies and procedures, including in the critically important area of parent and community engagement on issues of curriculum and assessments. Senator Carrozza says she wants to work together with fellow lawmakers to bring more transparency to education without overburdening teachers and administrators.
We've passed other transparency bills in the Maryland General Assembly and other areas, so we certainly want to pass it for our children, for our families, so parents and families, we can have that curriculum available. It can be transparent for all.
In Annapolis, Sue Copen for State Circle.
The Senate has voted in favor of new climate legislation. Supporters say the bill will cut greenhouse gas emissions by 60% in 8 years, calling that a bold but practical target. Governor Hogan says Maryland already leads the nation in reducing emissions, and the bill will increase costs for consumers. One GOP amendment targeted an increase in the Empower charge on utility bills.
Right now, as I said before, the average customer is paying between $9 and $10 or $6 and $9 a month, specifically written on their bill. So the bill as amended right now currently puts increases into the Empower from 2% to 2.25% to 2.5% and to 2.75%. All of these increases will become harder and harder to achieve.
I urge you to resist this amendment. Let me just give a couple quick items. We passed this last year with very little debate. Additionally, what the special task force that Public Service Commission is working on is probably going to come back with something more aggressive. We don't know that for a fact. We don't know what the plans are going to be, but I assume there'll be some objections to that. This is a bridge, ladies and gentlemen. It is a bridge to increase energy efficiency and hopefully reduce the energy cost to our low and modest income people.
A similar bill passed the Senate last year, but not the House of Delegates. Both houses have now approved legislation to ban the practice of declawing cats for non-medical reasons. Critics of the practice say it's often done for convenience, but inflicts great pain with amputation back to the cat's knuckles. If reconciled with the Senate bill and signed by the governor, Maryland would join New York State and a number of localities that have largely banned the procedure. State leaders are getting behind a gas tax holiday. Prices at the pump have been jumping due to inflation and the war in Eastern Europe. Comptroller Francho first proposed a 90-day suspension of the tax, which is about 37 cents per gallon. Legislative leaders are backing a 30-day suspension of the tax. Our newsmaker this week is State Budget Secretary David Brinkley. Mr. Brinkley, thank you for making time for us.
It's great to be with you, Jeff. It's good to see you again.
Likewise, the state revenue estimates were updated this week. What are the headlines from that?
Yeah, we had some very good news. What we're trying to do is recognize what's going on in the economy, and certainly as people are filing their taxes and everything else that came in. And I have to tell you, the numbers were honestly pretty staggering for us to deal with. We have an increase of $867 million just in the current year that we're dealing with now, that will end in a few more months. And then we wrote up the revenues, $737 million for next year. Now, the good news is it's been done with a lot of management and everything else that we can do. We've been able to supplant some federal funds for some of the state monies we have. The revenues that we're talking about are just based on tax returns, sales tax, what the economy's doing, what people are doing. Unfortunately, it doesn't really reflect what's happened with the inflation numbers, and particularly the gas situation that we're all very cognizant of now. So we have to be careful. There's a lot of people that are very excited about trying to get some of that money out the door. We are too, but my admonition, my caution to everybody, legislators, the governor, and anyone that'll listen, is let's also maintain a shock absorber. Just as quickly as this went in a positive fashion, it can go negative, and I'd rather not have a disruption in necessary services that we have for people if and when that happens. And it's just a matter of being cautious. We're also very excited about, I think this also gives some room for, the governor's advocacy of a retirement income tax reduction. We want people who retire in Maryland to choose to stay in Maryland and give back. I mean, as I mentioned in some of my talks yesterday, we have an awful lot of conversation about STEM education. And when we have military retirees, those from the intelligence community, whether it be NSA or whatever, we have an awful lot of intellectual resources here that we'd love to get to stay once they retire. And let's try to do something to help those individuals out.
It was shortly after the revenue numbers came out that the idea of a gas tax holiday took off. The comptroller, the governor, the leaders of the House and Senate getting behind it. What's the view of that from where you sit in the budget office?
So the revenues that come from the gas tax all go into transportation. So they go into the Transportation Trust Fund. So technically that's not within my domain. However, we do think that that's a policy that is important to move forward to help people deal with this shock and then see what happens, down the road. We're prepared, if it comes to that, and if the governor directs it, and if the legislative leaders are okay with it, to backfill the Transportation Trust Fund with some of these other surplus funds that we have. It might be an accounting gimmick that a lot of people don't see at their face, but I think it's trying to deal with something that's very important and hurts everybody's pocketbook. And that certainly is the sudden ramp up in fuel prices.
You were in the legislature for a long time. How do you think this is going to play with constituents of every member who's up for election this year?
Well, it's two different things. One is the gas tax issue, how that plays, and I think people certainly want to see that take place. But the other aspect is what happens on the retirement tax, what happens on some of these other issues that we see. And I hear from people, look, the state has all this money. And as you know, I also, since I was in the legislature, I always told everybody, this is OPM. It's other people's money. It's not the state's money. It's taxpayers' money. And therefore, I think there's a lot of people saying, hey, look, give some of that back. We've all been hurt in some way, shape, or form by the change that's going on with coronavirus. Looks like it's going to be with us for a long, long time, but we certainly have been able to harness some of the ill effects from that. And as people are making that transition, let's get some of this money back in their pockets.
At our taping time, what we understand is being discussed is a 30-day gas tax holiday. My brain immediately goes to day 30, where everybody in the state lines up to top off their tanks before the price goes up by, what is it, 37 cents the next day?
Pretty close to that.
Want
Yeah.
you to
Now we have
know-
to see what the federals do. The Fed government does too. So
Well, I'm going to line up on day 29. That's my plan.
let's hope there's plenty of fuel at that point in time. Again, this is an idea that I think everybody's rallying around. The specifics will be delineated in the bill. However, that is adopted. It should be. You've seen this enough for the public that's watching, so they understand it. It would have to be emergency legislation, which means it has to go through both houses relatively quickly, and it becomes law upon the signature of the governor. So it could take place immediately. But we'll have to see exactly what the details are within that bill and see what type of, I guess, change they might have for how that comes to closure at the end of the 30-day period or whatever they choose to adopt.
While we have some time, you've been the budget secretary for both of Governor Hogan's terms. I'm curious, 7 years into that, compare the budget that you're putting through this year to what it was at the beginning, and in size and composition, not line by line, of course.
Well, of course. I mean, I've got 5 volumes of books that could go through some of that, but it certainly is a different experience at this point in time. And I'm very honored that he gave me the privilege to be able to be here to try to represent him and advocate for some of what's going on. But we're coming out of this administration in a very different environment. Who could have foreseen the pandemic? Who could have foreseen some of the economic changes that took place from the governor's policies and trying to get people to, number one, keep their businesses here that were here. People that are here, let's get them to try to create new businesses in Maryland. Remember, we had an exodus going on. And then you get to the third tier where you actually find businesses and opportunities that are in other states and try to recruit them to Maryland. Our mission here is to provide jobs. He's done a phenomenal job to that aspect, and we see some of that. And then also by the bounce back that we had in recovering after, as we're dealing with the closure of the pandemic. We had a ramp down, we're coming right back up. But we now certainly have revenues. For the first time that I can remember, some of the technical people are telling me, no, we had a few years where that didn't happen. For the first time I can remember, we're now projecting surpluses on the structural basis. And I know, again, that might be one of those budget terms that people hear, but it's when we anticipate known expenses in the future versus what we anticipate would be in revenues. And we're in the black, and nowhere or at no time before do I recall that. They were always talking structural deficits, and now we have some surpluses going forward. That means give some of the money back to the taxpayers. Could also mean shoring up some of the services that have previously been promised but not delivered.
What's the impact going to be from the last election? Voters approved, I guess it was a constitutional amendment, giving the legislature more power in the budget process, more power to move money around. It won't affect you, but going forward, how do you see that working out in practice?
It's interesting because what you're referencing is the ability that the voters approve for the legislature to move money around, but they cannot increase the amounts that had overall been submitted. There still are some questions as to how that exactly is going to pan out. So we get different sources of funds. We have special sources of funds. They might come in licensing fees or something like that. General funds come from the lottery, the income tax things, sales tax things that people are familiar with there. And there's also federal funds. So if they supplant something with one, can they cross over in that venue? That's not quite clear yet. It's interesting. It'll put a new dynamic when you're in the legislative perspective, because there will then be new powers that they'll have that right now they can blame on the governor. They can blame on the executive branch for not having that happen. And now there really won't be an excuse. They can't, they're going to have to cut from some side to put somewhere else. And we'll have to see exactly how that pans out. It's just going to be a new school. Other states do it, but I think other states have different constraints in how they do it. Regardless, the Constitution still requires, and every budget that the governor has submitted is balanced, and they will continue to require to be balanced. Remember, Maryland's history. The reason we have the structure that we're leaving now was over 100 years ago, the voters also made a change because the legislative leadership had bankrupted the state twice, once in the early part of the 1900s and previously in the 1840s. And so we'll have to see if that type of fiscal discipline comes back, or will they be able to restrain themselves? We'll see.
Very, very few of the members from 100 years ago are still in office, I think. I know medical technology has advanced immensely, but I think I can go along with that agreement. Budget Secretary David Brinkley, sir, we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Jeff, it's great to be with you again. Take care and be safe.
Now, MPT's Charles Robinson profiles candidate for governor, Delegate Dan Cox.
Some people will say you are trying to exploit the schisms that the GOP has all over. How do you answer?
GOP supports America First values. That's not a schism. In fact, the only schism that's occurring, sadly, is from someone who I had previously strongly supported, our own governor. And I think that the exploitation of that office to oppress Maryland citizens has got to end. We have people right now facing termination from their jobs because they will not take the jab or they won't disclose their medical status, which is their right. And this, our governor could change that today, and the Commerce Secretary could make that clear. She's not, and they're not doing that.
Cox has been a member of the House of Delegates since 2019, where he represents Frederick and Carroll counties. The attorney has operated the Cox Law Center since 2007. He attended Mount St. Mary's College from 1992 to 1995, but received his BS degree from the University of Maryland University College in 2002. Cox would get his Juris Doctorate from the Regent University School of Law in 2006. He currently serves on the board of directors of the Maryland Association of Christian Home Educators.
Delegate Cox, tell us, why did you decide to run for governor?
Well, it's an honor to talk to you today, and it's an honor to be part of the legislature here. And when I'm here serving, one of the things that has stood out to many, many people is the need, the last 2 years especially, the need to embrace freedom. So freedom, although it sounds like a broad policy issue that would be interesting to talk about as a reason to run, it in fact is a policy issue that is very appealing to everyone in Maryland and has specific effect to the way we run our businesses, whether we can go to church without being threatened with arrest, whether we can have our schools open and accessible and without forced masking our kids. And so I'm running to make sure we keep our freedoms and take a different course than what we've taken the last 2 years.
And now our political roundtable. I'm Sue Kokening. Joining me is Brian Sears with the Daily Record. Brian, quite a wild ride till the end of this week, in particular having to do with quick action on the gas tax. So bring us up to speed on what happened today.
Well, what happened today was we have bills, or at least bill numbers. We haven't seen actual copies as of the taping of the legislation that the governor and the presiding officers in the House and the Senate say that they have agreed upon, which would essentially create a gas tax forbearance for the 30-day period, at least an initial 30-day period.
So how quickly can this move?
Pretty quickly. I mean, bills move as fast as they have to in Annapolis, sometimes a little slower. This one, there's some sense of urgency to get it done. In theory, we know that we're going to have a hearing in the Senate Budget and Taxation Committee on Monday, a hearing on the House bill and Ways and Means on Tuesday. In theory, we could see a bill on the floor passed and on the governor's desk by the end of next week. That's not unreasonable. Will it happen? I can't say for sure, but it's not inconceivable.
Of course, this comes on top of a rather amazing report out of the Board of Revenue estimates as well.
Yeah, normally, Sue, you've seen the goings on in Annapolis probably as long as I have, and you know that normally when we talk about the budget, we're talking about budget deficits and the need to find sofa cushions with cash under them, and now we're talking about historic budget surpluses. A revenue write-up on Thursday that pushed the budget surplus for 2 years in the neighborhood of $6 billion, and all of that is money that is cash in hand.
And of course, there are matters of call for tax relief. I know that there have been a couple of initiatives that have cleared the House, but I know the Republicans are requesting a little bit beyond that. I know you've talked to some folks about that as well.
Yeah, there's really the concern, especially among Republicans, that there has not been enough done in terms of broad-based tax relief. Republicans have tried, and I think will attempt to try again next week, to eliminate the automatic increases that are tied to the gas tax through the inflationary index. Those happen in July. There's a lot of desire to pause that. There's also been some calls. Delegate Kathy Szeliga, for example, from Baltimore County, would like to see the state use some of this surplus to send immediate $1,000 checks to everyone, to all taxpayers in Maryland. The comptroller has proposed his own set of taxes, which would include $2,000 checks to low-wage earners, plus $500 million each for childcare providers and small businesses. There's almost no shortage of ideas on what to do with this budget surplus.
And how much of this can we see through the prism of the upcoming election?
Look, I think probably you would call me a cynical person, but I think because it is an election year and we are seeing record inflation, something we haven't seen in the last 40 years, and gasoline increases that we also haven't seen in more than a decade. There's an election coming in November, and pocketbook issues are in front of everyone's mind. And I think a lot of people are very concerned about how this will play in the primary and then the general election.
And speaking of the election, I know we've got very little time, and the matter of redistricting, it remains before the court. Chances of having the primary delayed?
Yeah, I think pretty good. I mean, we had a hearing before special magistrate in February, and already lawyers for the state were saying that it was highly likely, if changes are made to the maps, that we're going to have to push the primary election.
All right, Brian Sears from the Daily Record, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our thanks to Brian and Sue, and that is State Circle for this week. Join us every week at this time as we bring the State House to your house. Monday on Direct Connection, answers to your questions about how Americans can help with the refugee crisis in Ukraine. That's Monday evening, live at 7. Now, for all of us at MPT, thanks for watching and have a good night.
University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science, leading the way on Chesapeake Bay restoration while guiding our state, nation, and world toward a more sustainable future.
Salisbury University educates tomorrow's professionals with graduate programs.